The Minnesota Wild take on the Dallas Stars tonight in Game 71 of the season in Dallas, and they will be shorthanded one key defenseman. Let's get the pulse for tonight's game.
Hey, this is Matt Boldy, and you're listening to Locked On Wild.
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome into a special pregame preview edition of Locked On Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team each and every day, and we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day as well. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Today, we will take a look at the matchup against the Dallas Stars tonight. We'll take a look at how Dallas is looking heading into the game tonight. We'll let you know who is going to be out of the lineup for the Minnesota Wild. And we'll take a look at a key area that could decide tonight's matchup as well. My name is Seth Toupal, host of Locked On Wild. And here's how this is going to work. We're trying this out for the rest of the season. A short, less than 20-minute little pregame pulse to get the feel for the matchup. And we're going to release this within an hour of the game starting so that we get an idea as to who's going to be in the lineup, who's going to be out. And we're going to see how that goes and see if that's something that we incorporate into the mix for next year too. Because as I have said, as the everydayers know, I have said many times, it feels like pregame is an area that you should do something, but I just have not found the right something yet. So we're going to give this a whirl and see how it turns out. Obviously, as we mentioned right off the drop, the Minnesota Wild's going to be a little shorthanded once again here tonight. Jonas Brodin out. He will not play in tonight's game after playing in last night's game. Was limping after the game, but said he was going to be fine going forward. The Wild are treating this as just a way to try not to overload him too quickly heading down the stretch. I got to say that's a little bit of a concern, but the team didn't sound worried really at all. So I guess we just take that for what it is. John Hines talking about it earlier today. A tweet from Joe Smith. We're trying to be really cognizant of a player being off for a long time with the type of injury he had, making sure we're putting him in a situation where he can come back and play at a high level, also not throwing him right in where it could re-aggravate. John Hines stressing that he did not re-aggravate, but that the team is just being cautious. And I suppose that's the right approach to take with the number of injuries that this Minnesota Wild team has suffered over the last, basically all season. But still, right off of the game, I would have to say that's a little bit of a concern. So let's talk a little bit more about the Minnesota Wild here. Obviously, a 3-0 week for the Wild last week. They beat the Los Angeles Kings 3-1. They beat the Seattle Kraken 4-0. They beat the Buffalo Sabres 4-1. So some signs of life from the offense, and Filip Gustavsson absolutely locking it down. You may have seen on social media today, Gus Bus getting the first star of the week for March 17th through the 23rd. And the numbers are pretty impressive for Gus. He went 3-0. He had a goals against average of 0.67 and a save percentage of 97.6%. And just really did a fantastic job of not allowing any of the teams that the Wild played to get back into the game whatsoever. Gave up a goal late to the Sabres. Otherwise, he could have had potentially a second consecutive shutout. And the goal he gave up against the Los Angeles Kings was also later on in the game as well. So Gus doing a great job of keeping teams off the board. But let's keep in mind as well, you played the Buffalo Sabres and the Seattle Kraken, two very inept offensive teams. Los Angeles Kings are good. They're a very good team. So we're not going to take anything away from that one. And honestly, with the way that the Wild had been playing previously, not really going to take much away from the other two wins. I'm just not going to, because you need the points at this point. And it's nice to be able to get back in the win column and rebound ahead of a very critical week for the team coming up here this week. So 3-0 in their last 3 games, 6-3-1 in their last 10 games. And as of right now, and we'll do this every game as well, looking at the playoff standings, the Minnesota Wild with 85 points right now. They are 4 points behind the Colorado Avalanche with the game in hand. They are 4 points up on the St. Louis Blues with 2 games in hand of the St. Louis Blues, who have won 6 games in a row. There is an 8-point cushion between the Wild and the Calgary Flames, although the Flames have a game in hand on the Wilds, and they have 3 games in hand on the Blues. So games in hand is a key statement for the Minnesota Wild here down the stretch, because everybody is at different levels. Everybody's at different levels of games played at this point in the season. So as of right now, the Wild's in the number 1 wild card spot, and a chance here tonight to pick up yet another impressive win against a team very much above them in the playoff standings, and a team that they could potentially, depending on how things play out, they could potentially line up against in the postseason. So it's going to take it's going to take a huge effort from the Minnesota Wild here in this one tonight, and it could very well come down to which team scores the first goal of the game, as we'll talk about in our key number to consider here in this game tonight, as we continue to get you set for tonight's matchup. Some players, notably, that are trending in the right direction. Matt Zuccarello in the month of March has 4 goals, tied with Freddie Gaudreau for the lead in goals for the Minnesota Wild. He's got 7 points in his last 10 games. Freddie Gaudreau's got 6 points in his last 10. Matt Boldy leading all Wild players with 8 points in the month of March, just 2 goals, although those goals have come recently. So that is hopefully a good sign that he is starting to kind of get himself back on track. So for the Wilds, obviously a big blow with no Jonas Brodin tonight. Declan Chisholm will slot back into the lineup in that second spot, that second pairing. So Chisholm certainly has played well this season and has bounced up and down the lineup. So that should be a hopefully a loss that the Wild are able to mitigate a little bit. There are a couple of emergency call-ups as well. Liam Ogren and Cameron Crody are with the team, but key note here, they can only play if the Wild would potentially be faced with playing less than a full lineup here tonight. So Ogren can only get in if the Wild would go under 12 forwards, and Cameron Crotty could only get in if the Wild would go under 6 defensemen. So that's how the emergency call-ups work. If they are able to field a minimum lineup, then those guys will not get in the game. So we'll see. We'll see who's banged up. We have no idea really beyond Jonas Brodin. We'll see who else is potentially ill or injured as we get closer to game time. The Dallas Stars are the target here tonight. We'll take a look at how the Stars have done recently, and we'll look at some key storylines on the Dallas side as we get you set for tonight's game, game 71 of the season between the Minnesota Wild and the Dallas Stars. We'll continue our pregame preview coming up right after this. Today's pregame preview edition of Locked On Wild is brought to you by Factor. Eating healthy doesn't have to be complicated. With Factor, you get chef-made, dietitian-approved meals that are ready to heat and eat in just 2 minutes, so you can fuel your body without the hassle of cooking. Factor meals arrive fresh, never frozen, and with 40 options across 8 dietary preferences each week, you can customize your menu to fit your goals, whether that's calorie smart, protein plus, or keto. And if you're somebody who has to get up and go right away in the morning, like me, they have a great line of breakfast smoothies as well. Chocolate banana, one of my favorites. And it just gives you that nice, needed boost of energy to get your morning started. It just, I prefer a little extra sleep as opposed to getting up and making breakfast. So that is certainly something that helps keep me alert and keep me awake at work. So eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/factorpodcast and use code FACTORPODCAST to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code FACTORPODCAST at factormeals.com/factorpodcast to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. Today's pregame preview is also brought to you by Wonderful Pistachios. Are you looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better-for-you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. I love the no-shells variety. Honey roasted is my go-to. In fact, I have a bag of them over on my coffee table. Anytime I'm feeling like just a little snack, Wonderful Pistachios is unquestioned the one to go with. So get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. That's wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Welcome back to today's pregame preview edition of Locked On Wild, taking a look at tonight's matchup between the Minnesota Wild and the Dallas Stars. And for the Minnesota Wild, coming off of a 3-0 week last week, the Dallas Stars, they come in having won their last game. But listen to this. The Dallas Stars have been in a little bit of a can't play anything other than a 1-goal game. If you go back to March 4th, they beat the New Jersey Devils 4-3. Since then, they beat Calgary 3-2 in overtime. They lost to the Edmonton Oilers 5-4. They beat Vancouver 4-1, lost to Winnipeg 4-1, but then they lost to Colorado 4-3 in overtime. They beat Anaheim 4-3 in overtime. They lost to Tampa Bay 3-2 in a shootout, and they beat Philadelphia 3-2 in overtime. So it's a little bit of every game that we play is going to be at least a 1-goal game, or it's going to go to overtime for the Stars here. And Pete DeBoer was pretty pointed in his assessment of the Dallas Stars in the game against the Tampa Bay Lightning. Said that basically that the effort level was terrible and that there was a small list of players that gave full effort in that game, and kind of walked out of his press conference after like a minute and 30 seconds. Not pleased. And it is a Dallas team that is obviously trying to navigate the loss of Miro Heiskanen. Sounds like he will be back potentially for the second round, but that would require then that the Dallas Stars win the opening round of the playoffs in order to get him back in the lineup. And the Dallas Stars stole the headlines at the trade deadline this year by going out and acquiring Mikko Rantanen. And the numbers for Rantanen have been interesting since he was acquired by the Dallas Stars at the deadline. He scored in his first 2 games with the Stars against Edmonton and Vancouver, but he has not scored in 5 straight games. He has 1 assist in the last 5 games, and the Stars, it is not a coincidence that the Stars, since he came on board, are 3-2 2-2. And a lot of overtime games, but you look at their overall record since, again, 3-2-2, they are dead even in the goals scored and allowed department, 3 goals per game. So again, these are all games that are tight, but it's just not quite, it hasn't quite gelled yet for the Stars, putting Rantanen in the mix. And there is an adjustment period that needs to be taken into account when you bring in a player of that caliber. You got to get them acclimated to the system that you're running, and you got to be able to, get them comfortable with new line mates, new tendencies. Rantanen obviously playing a top line role for the Dallas Stars, and he's got to get used to his new line mates in doing so. If we look at the Stars, basically since the trade deadline, Thomas Harley is actually leading the Stars in goals with 4, but you're getting solid contributions throughout the last 7 games. Mikael Granlund, former Wild center and forward, he's got 3 goals and 5 points in that span. Mason Marchment, Mikko Rantanen, Jason Robertson, all with 2 goals each. Jason Robertson has really come on since a slow start. He had 10 goals in the month of January to pull himself off the mat. Wyatt Johnston also with 2 goals in the since the trade deadline so far. Matt Duchene, 7 points in 7 games in that same span as well. And we know the story with this Dallas Stars team. They can hit you in a lot of ways. They've got a lot of depth that they can throw at you in the lineup. And this is going to test the Minnesota Wild considerably. The 2 matchups between these 2 teams this year have been very close. They have been incredibly tight, and it's been 1-goal wins for each of them over that span. But look at the numbers for Jake Oettinger since the trade deadline in net. He's 2-2-1. A 3.59 goals against average and an 865 save percentage. So his numbers are trending in the wrong direction as the season goes along. Same story as any goalie that you would face. The Minnesota Wild have to make sure that they attack, that they get to the net. If you leave opportunities, if you squander opportunities, then you're going to be upset. You're going to feel like you didn't do enough in order to attack a very good goalie in this league. In his last outing, he gave up just 2 goals to the Philadelphia Flyers on 24 shots. Gave up 3 to Anaheim. Gave up 4 to Colorado and Winnipeg and 5 to Edmonton. So a rocky 3 starts, but beyond that, he's been solid in the month of March, and of course he's been solid basically for the entire season, although got off to a much better start at the year. His goals against average has kind of started to inflate here over the last few months. Filip Gustavsson for the Minnesota Wild, if he is indeed announced as the starter, that should set up for a dandy matchup between the two. And it's a classic example. Don't try to tempt fate too much with the Dallas Stars power play. It's a lethal power play capable of really wrecking some things. But let's look at the numbers for both of these teams who are 2 of the best at holding leads after 1 and 2 periods. The Minnesota Wild win scoring first. They are 29-10-2 overall, 16-3-1 on the road. They are 15-2 when they lead after 1 period, and 16-0-0 when they lead after 2 on the road. The Dallas Stars at home, when they score first, they're 18-3-1, 13-0-1 when they lead after 1, and 16-0-1 when they lead after 2. Even when it's tied, 8-1-1 when it's tied after 2, 9-4 when it's tied after 1 period. The Wild are not as good. 8-7-1, or actually that's at home. 4-1-2 on the road when tied after 1, and 4-2-1 when tied after 2. 3-7-1 when they trail after 1 period, 2-8-2 when they trail after 2 periods. And the Dallas Stars as well. When they trail after 1, they're 2-8. When they trail, and that's on the road. When they trail after 1, they're 4-3-1. When they trail after 2, they're 2-6 at home. It seems basic, but score the first goal. Score the first goal of the game. Put some pressure on the Stars, and lock them down defensively. This is a game in which the Wild are going to need to get a couple of different lines going. They're going to need scores from a couple of different lines in this one, and going to need a big performance from Gus Bus as well. Leave your prediction for the score tonight in the comments section, and we'll give whoever gets it closest a shout out in the postcast tonight. So just leave what you think the score will be, and we'll see if the Minnesota Wilds can come up with a big win here on the road, or if Dallas will get the last laugh at home. But that'll do it for today's pregame preview, the Pulse, as we're going to call it, for today's game against the Dallas Stars. Thanks for tuning in as always, and we'll see you after the game for another Locked On Wild postcast. Again, we're keeping you up to date all week long here on Locked On Wild, so you never miss a beat with the Minnesota Wild. You can find new episodes, pregame pulse, and postcasts, all part of the Locked On Podcast Network.